What's up, everybody? Dana White just announced the entire main card for UFC Abu Dhabi, which is set for August 3rd. We already knew about a couple of these fights, but in this video, we're going to discuss all 5 of these fights. The first one, Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov, which we already knew that one was taking place. That is going to be the headliner. I've already done an in-depth breakdown for that one, so I'll link that one down below. We have the return of Nick Diaz taking on Vicente Luque. This one will be at 170 pounds, which is to note because Nick's last outing against Robbie Lawler, there was an injury. There were some things going on where that fight had to take place at 185. And Luque has a ranking next to his name. Pretty intriguing to me. Then we have Marlon Cheeto Vera taking on Davison Figueiredo. That's a crazy fight. Then we have Mackenzie Dern, Luque Godinez. This is an incredible matchup inside the women's strawweight division. And then we have Tony Ferguson, El Kukui taking on Michael Chiesa. So first, we'll start with Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov. I'll put the time codes down below. So I'm not going to go too in-depth because, like I said, I have a full breakdown on this already. This is a crazy fight, right? Sandhagen, I think, is maybe the most well-rounded guy in the entire division. We've seen the evolution of his game. He's gotten a lot better in terms of the striking, number one, the grappling. We've seen what he was able to do to Marlon Vera. We saw what he was able to do to Rob Font. He seemed to found a way to mix everything together to cause guys problems. Never let you get into that rhythm or that groove. But he's going up against a prospect in Nurmagomedov where when you hear that name, you instantly go, is this that next guy? That next dude who's going to be undefeated and just taking people down, mauling them? Like, that's kind of the vibe we get here. And there's no better way to find out than a matchup against a well-rounded guy in Sandhagen, who's basically been running through everybody, is basically one win away. You know, if he goes out there and beats Umar, I could very easily see him getting a title shot. And really, even if Umar wins, I could see the winner of this potentially getting a title shot against what would be the winner of Merab and Sean O'Malley. We've already heard that Merab is going to be next for the title against O'Malley. So whoever wins there, I could see this being a number one contender fight next for the title. So this is a crazy matchup because, one, we get to find out, can Sandhagen solve this puzzle that is Umar? And then can Umar show us, you know, that he is that guy going in there against the most complete guy, I would say, in the entire division in Sandhagen. This is a crazy matchup. Love this fight as a headliner, and obviously where the fight is being located, the stars seem to have aligned for Umar Nurmagomedov to go out there, and I would assume it's going to be a pro-Umar crowd there. Big moment for him, big spotlight, the biggest of his career. Corey's been in there for some big moments already. This is a crazy matchup. Okay, moving on. Nick Diaz, Vicente Luque. Now, I will put a disclaimer out there. Those of you that have been watching my channel, you can see with the background here, I got all the represent gear back here. I can be a little bit blinded by my loyalty and love for Team Diaz. And I don't know if I'm being blinded here, but I am really excited to see Nick return. And what a lot of people, actually a credible source that I had spoke to a while ago, not long after the Nick Diaz matchup with Robbie Lawler, there are some things going on behind the scenes with Nick Diaz's health coming into that matchup, right? That is all alleged, and I've heard some different things. I feel like we've all heard some things there. But there were some issues there, right? I mean, you saw Nick a few weeks out. The dude was shredded to the gills and then shows up for fight week and looks completely out of shape like he wasn't training. The fight has to be moved to 185, so clearly there was something going on there. But what's crazy to me about this fight, Vicente Luque, like I said in the beginning of the video, has a ranking next to his name. So we are now at the point where we could see Nick Diaz go out there, beat Vicente Luque, and be ranked inside the top 15 in the UFC welterweight division. Now, what I like about this is Vicente Luque is a guy that he has definitely not been himself. He has not been himself. We're not seeing Nick get thrown in there with some young guy who's been active and fighting the best in the world. Now, Vicente Luque has been in there with really good competition. There's no doubt about it. But we have definitely seen a decline in all aspects of Vicente's game, right? He's not as fast. He's not as powerful. Like, we're just not seeing the same dude that we saw a few years ago, where for Nick, you could kind of say the same thing. This is a guy that's not the same guy from years ago. But what I will say is this. I know a lot of people are like, why didn't they book Nick versus Tony? And fair point, right? I mean, because then somebody's got to win there. But I think that the UFC is just in an aspect where who knows what Nick is saying behind the scenes. I think this is it for Tony Ferguson after this fight, depending on what goes on here with Nick. I've seen the videos of him training. He's kind of back in the gym. Or not kind of. He is back in the gym. He looks like he's in good condition. I like this fight. Call me crazy. I think it's a great matchup. Now, the issue with Nick that it's kind of always been, especially against Robbie Lawler, hopefully everything is okay leading into the fight. Hopefully there's no injuries. There's no, we've seen Nick in the past, just some of the mental barriers of things that go on outside the cage that kind of hold him up. And we've seen the whole blasphemy case with him and getting suspended and all the wrongdoings that have happened for this guy. He's been treated so unfairly, but we get to see him in there against a ranked opponent. I believe Nick goes out there and can beat Vicente Luque. If Nick is focused, dedicated, in shape, and lasered in at the task at hand, I think he goes in there and beats Vicente Luque. I really do. I don't think Vicente Luque is that guy anymore. I don't think he's a top contender in the division. And I think it's crazy because, like I said, if Nick wins, ranked inside the top 15, pretty crazy. But I'm riding with Nick Diaz, man. I think he gets it done. Glad to have him back, by the way. All right. Chito Vera, Deiveson Figueiredo. This is a crazy fight. This is a crazy fight. Out of all, the main event and then this fight are the two best fights on the card, right? Marlon Vera, first of all, it's crazy how he goes out there, takes a whooping against Sean O'Malley, and he's going to be returning before O'Malley, right? Chito Vera is one of those guys. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. I like his mentality. I like his, the vibe that he brings. He has a really unique fighting style as well. He's good out of both stances. He's really good everywhere. The problem with Marlon Chito Vera is the speed. And my issue in this fight with Deiveson Figueiredo, Figgy's fast, man. Figgy's fast, and what we saw in his most recent outing against Cody Garbrandt, if he mixes in the grappling, it could be a little bit of a problem. And what have we seen in terms of the issues for Chito Vera? Well, guys have stood with him. They throw some things at him, get him to cover up, and then they dip underneath, take him down, and we just have seen that game plan work really, really well against Marlon Chito Vera, and I'm worried that Figgy is going to be able to implement a game plan like that. However, I am going to pick Marlon Chito Vera to win this fight. I think that Chito gets back on the high horse, and I think that as good as Figgy looked, we saw how he looked against Rob Font. We saw how Rob Font was having some success against Chito Vera, right? MMA math doesn't always work. It really never works out, really. But we've seen Chito Vera struggle with the speed of some of these guys. The problem for me, we haven't seen a 135er really impose their size and strength on Deiveson Figueiredo yet. And if there's a guy who's going to be able to do that, I think Marlon Vera can do it. I think that this is a hard fight. I think Figgy's got good speed. He's really shown that bantamweight seems to be a great fit for him, power, speed-wise. Like, he's not undersized. And I am worried about the grappling aspect. But one thing we know about Chito Vera, he's tough, he's durable. He has good combinations. Actually, I'm not so confident in my Chito pick. I got to be honest. My early prediction, I'll say Chito. Maybe it changes as the fight progresses because this is going to be 3 rounds. And that I'm just remembering that as I'm looking at it. And that's kind of a little bit of a deal breaker for me because we've seen Marlon. He's so slow to kind of get going. And when's the last time we've seen him in a 3-round fight? It's been some time. So that's going to be an adjustment. But if he has his foot on the gas, if he comes out there and has a point to prove and is aggressive and gets in the face of Figueiredo, I can see him having a lot of success. But my hesitation, you know what? I'm going to go early prediction. I'm going to flip and say Figueiredo here. But maybe I change it for when we get closer to the fight. But I'm just going off the rip here off my head. But it worries me. 3 rounds. If Rob Font was in there against Chito Vera for 3 rounds, Rob Font wins. A lot of these fights where, Marlon Chito Vera, Frankie Edgar, a lot of these matchups, he's losing. Even Pedro Munoz, he's losing. And Deiveson Figueiredo is way better than those guys, in my opinion. So it's hard for me to pick, to pick Marlon Vera at this point. I'm rooting for him. I would like to see him win. But right now, hard for me to say that I think Chito Vera is going to win as much as I want to see. I think he has good striking. I think that, obviously if Figgy takes it to the ground, we know Marlon Chito Vera has some good grappling. I don't know. I think it's a hard fight for Chito. Great matchup, though, because the bantamweight division's on fire. It's stacked, and I think whoever wins puts himself in position to maybe one more win, and they're back in the title picture type of discussion, especially Figgy, considering this would be his 3rd win inside the division. Great matchup. This is the 2nd best fight on the card behind Umar and Corey Sandhagen. All right, Mackenzie Dern, Luque Godinez. It's a great fight. It's a great matchup. And, and this card, it's very clear what they did, right? Abu Dhabi, we know kind of there's been some rumblings behind the scenes of like, oh, these cards haven't been good enough. Abu Dhabi's been upset. They're like, no, go build us a bigger card before you come back to us. They postponed some things. So they stacked this card out with big names. Now, Mackenzie Dern has outstanding grappling. We know she has really good jiu-jitsu skills, but we've seen in terms of the striking, it's kind of a disaster, right? And that's being nice. I'm being nice. It's a disaster. It's sloppy. It's all over the place. And I think that Luque Godinez, I think she's going to be able to tee off on Mackenzie Dern. However, anytime the fight hits the floor, we've seen Mackenzie, with her grappling, you can never rule her out. Early prediction, I'm leaning towards Luque Godinez. I don't like what we've seen in terms of the striking from Mackenzie. Now, she has improved in the aspect of, she's a little bit more technical than what she used to, but she still gets a little reckless. And if she's not able to close down Godinez and get her down, I don't see her having a lot of success. I see her kind of being like a moving heavy bag, so to speak, on the feet. While she does have good power of her own, that means she's in the pocket throwing recklessly like we've seen at times, which can work to her advantage. I don't think it would against Luque Godinez, an up-and-comer. I got Godinez in this matchup for an early prediction. Last but not least, the matchup that I do not like at all. Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. I know people are going to talk bad about Nick Diaz in returning. I think that Nick Diaz has a lot more left in the tank than Tony Ferguson does, right? We've seen the sample sizes from Tony how many times in a row now. I never thought that 5-6 years later we would be sitting here, UFC 229, Khabib versus McGregor. We're sitting there watching Tony Ferguson. I think it was Anthony Pettis go out there, and we're looking at Tony to now this point in time where it's 7-fight losing streak, I believe it is at this point, just really getting steamrolled. Now, granted, the majority of that are still legit dudes that are ranked, guys that are up and coming, prospects. So he's not in there with scrubs. He's in there against top flight competition. The problem is, no matter who you put Tony in there with right now, I don't have confidence in him beating anybody. I don't know how in your right mind you could pick Tony Ferguson to beat Michael Chiesa in this matchup. This seems like a layup for Michael Chiesa, in my opinion, because what has given Tony the issues in this fight, in these past couple fights, is on the feet. We've seen some good things, right? At times, right? We saw him land some shots on Paddy Pimblett. We saw him rock and hurt Michael Chandler. People tend to forget about that when they're talking about the McGregor-Chandler matchup. Let's not forget when Tony Ferguson dropped Michael Chandler. Tony Ferguson, he's just kind of it's a disaster. It just is, man. And please don't have David Goggins in his corner again. That is not what Tony Ferguson needs. The guy has a great mentality. He has cardio. It's the fighting style that Tony fights, that chaotic, weird, awkward movement. The minute you get older, the minute your eyesight is not as good as it used to be, your reflexes are not as good as they were, that fighting style just goes to rest. When you look at boxing, right, we see a guy like Roy Jones Jr., his career is going to die out before a guy like Mike Tyson. Why? Mike Tyson can get away, not get away with a lot of things, but he has his hands up a lot higher. That movement, it's not all dependent upon eyesight. When your hands are very low and you're pulling your head out of the way and moving, that is when your eyes and that youthness, that's the first thing to go, man. It's kind of a disaster, and that's what we see with Tony Ferguson, and I just don't see how he beats Michael Chiesa. I mean, the grappling here, Chiesa's probably just going to take him down, hold him down. Maybe I see Chiesa pulling off a submission here. I see him submitting Tony Ferguson, and it's just going to be sad to see. Of course, I would love to see Tony pull this off. I feel like we all would love to see Tony pull this off, win, go out on a high note. Don't think it happens. I think he gets absolutely dominated in terms of the grappling with Michael Chiesa. And it's not to say that Chiesa can't hurt him on the feet. And I know that Chiesa's not a world beater at this point. He's later in his career. But he still has more left in the tank than Tony Ferguson does. I don't like this fight at all. This is my least favorite fight on the match, on the card. But it is what it is. It's fun whenever we get to see, big names thrown on a card. But at this point in Tony Ferguson's career, I think it was time for him to retire. Just my thoughts. I want to hear from you all down in the comments. Like this video. Comment your early predictions below and your thoughts on this card and its entirety. Subscribe to the channel. Help your boy out. I would appreciate it. See you next time.